I'm a snake. I'm a sneaky snake. Boo. Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. I have a face of makeup on because I was on the podcast Lightbringers today, and of course we were watching and live reacting to the Elite Specialization live stream reveal, and there is so much to cover, but in this video I'm going to be going over the traits for the Virtuoso and then talking about the Harbinger. So let's get started because there's a lot to go over. So first and foremost, I want to actually touch base with the Virtuoso. I've already had a video, click the card above, anywhere, where I've gone over the skills, I've gone over the utility skills and the profession mechanics, though they didn't show the actual traits. So what I want to do first before we touch on the Harbinger is go over the traits. So for the Virtuoso, we have the minor traits, and these include deadly blades. Blades inflict vulnerability on crit. This, I originally thought only impacted the weapon skills and the clone generation skills, but actually, in fact, all of the shatters, the blade songs, and I also think the utility skills, those are all classified as blades. And this trait will be applicable across pretty much the entirety of the elite spec. It's not going to be just the weapons. And I actually didn't realize that on the live stream, so I was like, oh, that's not too powerful, but no, this could be a very powerful trait. Next up, we have Quiet Intensity. It is Fury, and it gives you increased crit chance by 10%. And you also gain Ferocity based on your Vitality, which is 10%. Now that we've covered the minors, let's go and talk about the Adepts. First and foremost, they have mental focus. Strike damage is increased by 15% within the range threshold of 600. Now, I'm going to give feedback where I can. I'm not going to stop every single time, but when something is a big problem point for me, I'll stop and talk about it. I do not understand why this trait would be on this elite specialization. Why would you give the Mesmer a long-range weapon of 1200 range and then implement a trait that would force them to be closer and to fight in practical melee range? And that's fine if that is existing on the elite spec. But where in this elite spec is there a trait that emphasizes you to play it ranged, considering that this specialization does not have any movement, really? It doesn't have much speed, not many forms of evasion and getting away. It's mostly reliant on blocks. So why, in fact, would they say and have a trait that doesn't play to the strength of being at ranged for this class? Now, could you imagine if we had the Dragon Hunter? Dragon Hunter has a trait where they do increase damage at long range, of course, because it's a longbow with 1200 range, and it makes sense. You're supposed to be playing it ranged. Could you imagine if they changed that trait to say you now deal 600, or you now deal 15% more damage if you are in fact in the 600 range threshold? Yeah, that doesn't make any sense. So why is it on Virtuoso? I think this, if they were to change one trait in this entire line, that is the trait that needs to be changed. This trait should act in accordance with you deal 15% or 10% more damage if you're at a range threshold of 900 and above. Now, a lot of people might say, but range is easy. No, it's not. Guild Wars 2 is such a melee-focused and melee-intensive game, especially in structured PvP, when you're trying to cap and decap nodes. And people scream at you to fight on point all the time, so I'm gonna go to point. But then again, I'm supposed to be ranged. And even if you're fighting against the enemy team could have a bunch of range characters like rangers or even dragon hunters or, rifled warriors who are doing a lot of damage. So you can still get a lot of damage put on you at melee, and you can get a lot of damage placed on you at ranged. They're both fair and equal play styles. I don't want any of that. It's a risk-reward factor. No, it's not. Because even on stream, the developer said that you're already getting more rewards playing at close range with the dagger. So why even create range thresholds of 1200? Next up, we have Jagged Mind. Blade attacks have a chance to inflict one bleeding on a critical hit. Now they say a chance, but in PvE it's 100% chance. In PvP and World vs. World, this could be a little bit different. But this is where we are seeing another condition aspect granted to Mesmer. I don't I don't want to say that I'm not totally against it, because I do think power and condition damage playstyles can coexist on the same elite specialization, but it feels weird because we were just given the Mirage, and that was really condition focused. Now, they didn't have super high amounts of bleed or anything, but it is a little strange that they're focusing on bleeding for this elite specialization. If anything, I would have loved to have seen a little bit more self-sustain on the bottom line, but no, they're going with a bit more of a Condi oriented. But the top line is a little bit more about blocks and dodges. We have Blade Turn Refrain. Blade songs grant Aegis. I actually really love this trait. I like traits that are very simplistic and do one thing, and this is really strong. In PvE, of course, I should have prefaced the entire video, this is all in PvE setting, there is no cooldown, but the shatters themselves, the blade songs, they do have cast times. So you're not going to be able to just spam them all to get multiple applications of Aegis within a very short amount of time. You'll have to commit to a cast time. And I really like it. I mean, this also incentivizes players to, bolster themselves. And if they're playing at ranged, you might be fighting against another ranged class. And a lot of people are saying it's good because you'll have to go in to get use out of this. But then again, you don't have to, because there's already other ranged classes. You could be hit with a Fireball, a Phoenix, an Arrow, and you'll still get use out of this trait. Next up, we have Masters. Phantasmal Blades. Phantasms launch a blade at their target and grant Fury when they expire. I also really love this trait too. I think it's pretty simplistic. It's not doing too much. It's very focused on what it's doing. It's using more phantasms and it's cherishing the phantasms because we no longer have clones. And it's also granting you a little bit more Fury, which is already passively improved on this elite specialization. Next up, we have Sharpening Sorrow. Gain Fury when you activate F2. Fury increases your expertise. I think Sharpening Sorrow could in fact be like, the more blades you have, the more expertise you have, to kind of promote a playstyle of you holding onto your blades until you get max stacks. Next, we have Duelist's Reversal. Blocking or dodging grants boons, and these boons are quickness and fury. Very strong. It plays into that blocking and dodging theme. And finally, we are entering the Grandmaster tiers. We have Psychic Riposte. Blocking or dodging an attack stocks a blade and shoots one at your attacker. I also like this Grandmaster trait. I don't know if it'll be super strong, but it's good for blade generation, as are the other two Grandmasters. Next, we have Infinite Forge. Automatically stock blades while below the minimum 3 blade count, and this happens every 3 seconds. I don't think this trait is super strong because it appears to only stock 2. If it in fact stocked 3, that'd be really cool. If not, I think it'd actually be really interesting if this Grandmaster trait gave you an extra blade to hold, and it's like instead of having a maximum capacity of 5, you now have a maximum capacity of 6. But, I don't know if they wouldn't get too power crept with, charging and using 6 blades at a time. And then finally we have Blood Song. Bleeding you apply deals increased damage, 25%, and you stock a blade after applying 5 bleeds. This is really highlighting a condition damage aspect to this. To say, I think the bottom row won't work. I don't think that this elite spec will see condition playstyles. I don't. Unless they do something where they do Scepter, but Scepter doesn't apply bleeds, so you really wouldn't get any use out of the traits. The blades themselves and the dagger only will apply bleeds when you're traded for it, and that doesn't seem to be super reliable because you have to crit. The blade songs could apply conditions and, applying bleed as well, but the utilities themselves don't necessarily have any bleed application or damaging conditions on them. So I don't know why they went for this condition aspect to the Virtuoso. If anything, I would have liked to have seen a little bit more support at the bottom line, where when you are holding on to your blades, like when you use them, you heal allies around you, or like one of the blade songs turns into a support type song. Something a bit different. I really think they could totally revamp the bottom line for Virtuoso, but we'll have to see and test them come Tuesday. So now that we've covered the Virtuoso and given a little bit of feedback about how I truly dislike that one trait, we'll be going into Harbinger. Now I also have a lot of thoughts about Harbinger, mostly revolving around the conditions they're using. But nevertheless, let's go over the weapons, the utilities, the profession mechanic, and the traits. So for the Shroud, they started with the Shroud, so we'll start with the Shroud. We have the Harbinger Shroud. Now this Harbinger Shroud works different. It will not be replacing your health or acting as a secondary health bar. Instead, it will be healing you for any missing health that you have when you're not in Harbinger Shroud, and it will actually use life force actively. So you'll have to really sustain and keep up your life force application if you want to fill that bar and have a nice time in the Harbinger Shroud. There's also another mechanic to this, the Blight. When you're in Harbinger Shroud, you'll be getting stacks of Blight, which decrease your base health. They don't damage you necessarily, they totally lower your maximum health. So you could be at 20,000 health, but if you gain a maximum stack of Blight, your total health pool will be set down to 10,000. You're not going to take damage unless you're being attacked though, so you'll just be more squishy when someone does start attacking you. But for the Harbinger Shroud, they have Tainted Bolts. It's damage and torment, 2 projectiles, and the Doomfire has been hinted at being changed for this. Next, we have Dark Barrage, which is damage and 6 torment on a 4-second cooldown. Next, we have Devouring Cut, which is another damage and torment, and also a movement ability. The 4th skill is Voracious Arc, which is damage and a daze, and it has a radius of 180. And I believe this one is an evade, could be wrong, has a 10-second cooldown. Another movement ability. And the 5th one is Vital Draw. You damage enemies, you CC them by floating them, and you drain out their life force to generate more life force. This is on a 20-second cooldown. This is a teaser at the amount of conditions and the type of conditions that I actually don't think should have been on this spec, but we'll get to that after we talk about the pistol. So the pistol, the 1st skill is Vicious Shot. You damage and torment foes, and it bounces twice, and all of these pistol skills have a range of 900. The 2nd ability is Weeping Shots. It's damage, vuln, and torment, 6 stacks of vuln and torment. And the 3rd ability is Vile Blast, once again damaging, but this time poison and weakness. Now that I've gone over the Shroud skills and also the pistol skills, I want to put a bit of my input in, and this has to do with the conditions. Scourge was already a very condition-focused elite specialization, and this one seems to be as well. Now, you might be like, oh, that's cool. There's a bunch of conditions. They can be focused on a specific type of condition that they haven't done already. Wrong. They're doing Torment again, which I don't like at all, and I don't think necessarily fills the niche and fulfills the fantasy of what the Harbinger is. It seems to be a spec that deals with life. It deals with healing. It deals with the health pool. And the one condition that really focuses on the health pool and healing is poison, because that condition will lessen the amount of healing that your enemy can do to themselves. So it really makes it a difficult time for healers. Now, granted, you don't have to have poison on every single ability like they've done with the Torment. But overall, I'm really questioning why they put Torment on this and why they didn't maybe tune it down to be a little bit more damage oriented, because we haven't necessarily seen a ranged strike physical damage class for Necromancer. We already had the condition damage application for Scourge, which was heavily Torment and Burning based, and why they wouldn't go in the direction of doing more weakness and poison. I think Torment could be on a couple of these skills, but I would have liked to have seen a bit more focus on poison. I'm saddened to see that there is another condition aspect to this. I would have liked if it was just a bit more stronger in terms of their 900 range damage with piercing capabilities. I think that fills enough of a niche. I don't think it necessarily needs Torment on these abilities, let alone every single ability and every single, well, not every single, but the 3 really, really, really strong Harbinger Shroud skills. It's just a lot of Torment. I don't think it's necessary. So now that we've gone over the Shroud and the pistol, let's talk about the utilities, these being elixirs. First and foremost, I want to say that I think the elixirs, the icons for them, should be changed. They look exactly the same. And it's, even for me, as someone who is not colorblind or has, vision issues, it is the literal exact same graphic pasted onto each of the utility skills with a different color. It's kind of disappointing, honestly, and I always love the art, and the weapon skills historically have had really cool icons. They've had very statement piece icons, and these feel not necromantic at all and very basic. The art style for the utility skills have real world repercussions, and we were talking about this on the Lightbringers, so I really hope that they change them. Like, if anything, in terms of the art, if they have to change the art, this would be the category to do it in. For the heal, we have Elixir of Promise. It's a very small heal, but it grants Vigor, Blight, and Life Force. Now, I was a little worried that it literally gives no healing. It gave around 2,000 health, but then I remembered your Life Force will be your passive heal over time that is constant. No matter what you do, as long as you have Life Force, you will be healing up by using your Life Force. So keep that in mind. Next, we have Elixir of Risk. This gives Might, Fury, and Blight. And all of these are on a 25-second cooldown as well, which I don't know if I precisely love, but you know, this is PvE. Next, we have Elixir of Anguish. It gives Swiftness and Quickness, and Blight. Elixir of Bliss grants Resolution, Blight, and it removes 5 conditions. And then Elixir of Ignorance, Blight, Resistance, and a Stun Break. And we have the Elite. I didn't finish. We have the Elixir of Ambition. You gain all boons, and you gain Blight. You get 10 stacks of Blight, which is 20% less health, and for quite some time. This is really strong, and I think there could be maybe a bit more of an interesting thematic way to do it. If you're above 50% health, you gain a bunch of offensive boons. If you're below 50% health, you gain all the defensive boons. Because at least then it wouldn't feel like such an easy click this button and you are immune to everything. You have all the damage, you have all the crit chance, you have all of the protection, the Aegis, the Swiftness, the Resistance, the Resolution, the Regen. There is literally no skill to this. There's no planning per se. I mean, in any situation, you're either going to press this because you want more damage, or you want to press this because you want some of those defensive boons. But I think if they split it up, you'd have to be a little bit more conscious of when you use it. Next, let's talk about the traits. First, we have the minors. Alchemic Vigor. Increase vitality by 360. I have been debating if I like this trait or not. Necromancers already build a lot of vitality, and they already have a soul reaping trait that grants them vitality. And I understand that they don't have a death shroud to supplement as a secondary health bar. So I understand that, but I think this is too easy. I think this is too much of a softball. It's not necessarily promoting a risk factor because you're just giving them more vitality. I think I don't like this trait because it's such a default. It's such a strong trait for necromancers because their death shroud and their harbinger shroud is based off of their vitality. And so if we want to have this system where we're going to make necromancers squishier, I don't think we should just be giving them vitality for free. Now, if it was a trait that you spec into for maybe newer players that are having some difficulty with this spec, I think that's okay. But baseline, I don't know. I'm a little concerned just because there's already so much vitality. Necromancers build vitality flatline, Valkyrie gear. They often take that vitality trait in soul reaping. So I don't know. I'll have to see. And then next up, we have Corrupted Talent. Gain life force when entering Shroud. I actually really enjoy this trait. Talk about the Adepts. We have Wicked Corruption. Deal 1% more damage for each stack of Blight. I like this a lot. It's a give and take. You have to sacrifice your health for some more damage. 1%, maybe in PvE, I mean, you can get to what, 10 stacks? 10 or 20 stacks? I'm not exactly sure, but you could get, I think it is 20%. You could possibly get 20%, 15% more damage, which isn't anything to scoff at. So I like it. It's cool. And then next we have Septic Corruption. This is the same but for condition damage. Deal increased condition damage 1% for each stack of Blight, and your Shroud 2 inflicts poison. Now, I think this is a little too similar to the last one, but of course it's the condition aspect of it all. I actually would like this, you know, if they happen to change. In my perfect world, they would change the Torment to really just be poison. And they would get rid of some of the conditions on a couple of the abilities because there's so many condies on all the skills. If they happen to change in this fantasy world where they go into the more poison and weakness direction, this skill, Septic Corruption, could be another trait where you gain benefits for applying poison. You gain expertise when you apply poison. Your poison deals increased damage. When you apply poison, you gain increased stacks of condition damage, something like that. But I do like the fact that your Shroud skill 2 will inflict poison. Vile Vials. Elixirs gain reduced recharge and inflict vulnerability and slow in a 240 radius around the player. This doesn't seem like it'd be super powerful because a lot of people only gauge power based off of the damage that you're doing. But Vuln and Slow is really powerful in a 240 radius. But then again, the elixirs do cause blight, so you'd be risking your health for applying vulnerability and slow to your enemies. But overall, I think this could be really, really strong. Now for the master. We have Implacable Foe. This is a callback to Foot in the Grave. Gain stability when entering Harbinger Shroud. You also gain ferocity based on your vitality. All of these traits in this row have to do with vitality as well. The ferocity is cool. It plays into more of that power aspect that I really wish the Harbinger just focused in on. The stability is wonderful when you think about the passive trait, Corrupted Talent. You can just pop into Shroud if you ever need to secure a kill in PvP, if you want to get that stack of stability, or if you're fighting and you see a CC ability coming and you're like, oh, pop into Shroud, it's off cooldown. You get the life force and you get the stability. I really like it. And next we have Dark Gunslinger. Pistol skills gain reduced recharge. Gain expertise based on vitality, 13%. Now, if they ever change, and I really want them to, if they maybe go in a bit more of a power direction, I think expertise is still really good because expertise is often associated with condition damage builds. But if you have more expertise, that means your weakness condition will last longer. And it's not a damaging condition, so power players will get a lot of use out of it because you're not taking as much damage. And also, they can't dodge roll as much. Next, we have Twisted Medicine, and this is your boon support trait. Elixir skills also grant their boons to allies. You also gain concentration based on your vitality. And so, let's talk about the Grandmasters. We have Cascading Corruption. Well, before we actually talk about that, let me get this out of the way. I don't like this. I don't like these Grandmasters. They all do the same thing. It's a little bit boring to me because they all have to do with just an AoE around you when you're in Harbinger Shroud. When I was first watching it, I was really excited because I was like, oh, you get like a pulsing area around you. And then I saw that each Grandmaster is doing the same thing. So with that, it feels almost like no matter what, you're going to fight a Harbinger with one of these effects. And I actually kind of prefer it when Harbingers have a bit more of a simplistic effect. Or like you have to take a trait to keep someone on their toes, like, oh, they have an AoE around them, be careful. Now, Harbingers by default will just always have a pulsing AoE around them. Two of the traits are damaging and condition oriented, and one of them is more support oriented. But nevertheless, I would have liked to see some changes to these in terms of how they trigger. So Cascading Corruption, your power's increased, which is good, and you gain an aura, which deals damage and cripples. I think this should be changed. I think this should be changed in the manner of when you leave Harbinger Shroud, you pulse damage and you apply weakness. Cripple, I don't understand it. You already get the gun, you have long range abilities. Do you need cripple? Probably not. So I would like to see maybe this be a more spike damage, a flat damage when you leave Harbinger Shroud, and you can do some damage and some weakness. Next, we have Doom Approaches. Condition damage is increased. You gain an aura that applies Torment and Weakness. Now, the weakness isn't on this trait, but I think if Torment and Cripple were paired, that's kind of like a better cycle, because Torment does more damage if foes aren't moving. Cripple, you're slowing enemies down, so maybe you can CC them, and you can maybe get some more use out of it, or if an enemy is just going super slow, they'll just stop moving altogether. And, you know, I think it kind of works a little bit better than the weakness. Next, we have Deathly Haste. While in Harbinger Shroud, pulse quickness to allies. And this is 5 allies and a 240 radius. I kind of would like this to be a bit bigger if it was 300 radius. I often encourage radii for support abilities to be increased. While for damaging and condition abilities, I want the radius to be shrunk because they are damaging. They're very oppressive. Now, in PvP, of course, radius can be checked and stuff, but in a PvE setting, I think a 300 range, 360 range, especially with the elixirs as well, could be better. Just in case, you know, you're already being a very risky playstyle, you're getting your health degenerated quite a bit, so why do you have to be in the fight? Why are you going to be pushed into the fight to take even more damage just to share some extra boons, when Guardians and Firebrands, they can do that so much easier and they don't have their health destroyed? So in a PvE setting, I would like to see the radius increased. So everyone, that was the Virtuoso trait line and the Harbinger roundup for all the skills and my overall impressions of the Harbinger. I guess as a roundup, I enjoy the Virtuoso traits. I like them more now that I've actually gone back and looked at them and seen the better intricacies with the blade songs and the blades and all those things. Though I don't understand why they have a trait that is forcing you into melee. It doesn't make any sense. You wouldn't do that to a Dragon Hunter. You wouldn't do that to the Deadeye. Why are you doing it to the Virtuoso? The Harbinger is interesting, but I don't like that they're Torment focused. I think if they were Weakness and Poison, I think that'd be better. It would fill a niche that the elite specializations have not seen yet. I think that's also a very important thing to point out. And I'm really enjoying the power capabilities on the pistol. Overall, the Harbinger is interesting, but I don't know. It's kind of a mixed bag so far. I'm going to be talking about the Will Breaker in the next video, because that I love, and I think is probably the best elite spec that they have shown. Just because the Virtuoso and Harbinger seem so muddied. They seem like they're trying to do so much. They seem to be kind of competing for that Firebrand spot. But then again, no one liked Firebrand because it was so overpowered. Then Scourge, too. I mean, Scourge is still overpowered, and they're going to be nerfing it, too. Anyways. Thank you, everyone, so much for coming. I hope you guys enjoyed. Like to favorite, comment down below your thoughts about this elite specs. Subscribe. I have a Patreon down below where you can get early access to videos, exclusive content, and all that stuff. I'm an official ArenaNet partner, which means I have links down below where you can pre-order End of Dragons, pre-purchase existing expansions, and try the game out for free. Those links greatly help me, and I really appreciate it. But I'll see you guys in the next video. I'm so tired. Bye, everyone!